This is exciting, isn't it?
Here we go, guys. In 5, 4, 3. Here we go.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Thank you for the good programming. I appreciate the content and really enjoyed every moment.
It's a privilege to have you on your station and listen. It's good stuff. It's very educational.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Uh-oh. Guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Woo-hoo!
That never fails to put a smile on my face. And, there's a lot of truth in that. It is hump day. Once you get through Wednesday, you're okay. Thank you for joining me this Wednesday, February 26th. I want to tell you a couple of things before I distract myself, which, as we all know, I so easily do. I have been listening to an audiobook that is shaking me to my core. I read a lot of political books. I'm drowning in political books here at my little office. And the reason that I started with this book is because I saw that the New Trier Democratic Organization was going to start doing a book club. They were going to meet on Wednesdays to talk about a book, and I don't have all the details. I don't know if it's going to be a different book every week. I don't know if it's going to be like my daughter's in a book club where they talk like every couple of chapters about what's happened, and they don't wait till the end of the book. So the book that the New Trier Democrats are going to start with, because this book club is new, is called Tyranny of the Minority. Tyranny of the Minority by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. And it is starting with sort of a historical look at other times and other places where there has been a rise of authoritarianism, where democracies have weakened to the point of breaking. And this book, it's giving me chills. I've just barely scratched the surface. I mean, I'm about to finish the second chapter. But what has happened in countries like France, countries like Germany, countries like Thailand, Spain had a democracy and then it didn't. Thailand had a democracy and then it didn't. France had its democracy challenged. And the authors talk about how a democracy unravels. And here's the interesting thing, and this is what really gives me chills and what I see now. They talk about it, you can have Javier Bolsonaro, you can have a Donald Trump, you can have a strong man or a would-be strong man, but by themselves, they can't pull it off. They can shout loud and long, and they're all their far-right, horrible, xenophobic policies, but they cannot pull this destruction of democracy off by themselves. The people who make the destruction of democracy possible are the people who have a low commitment to democracy. In other words, party officials and elected officials who enable the strong man to tear democracy down because, well, they think they have to look out for their own best interest, go along to get along. They see the price that an Adam Kinzinger or Liz Cheney paid, and, they're not really willing to put their whole career on the line. They fought too hard to get where where they are now. Better just to sign off on Kash Patel, though you know he's a terrible leader for the FBI. Sign off on Pete Hegseth, though you know that he has problems with alcohol and is potentially a rapist. But you know what? It's just easier. It's easier to agree. They have people who do not have a full-throated, passionate commitment to democracy. People, he says, who will not stand up to their own party when their own party does things or tries to do things that are not democratic. These authors say it's easy to stand up and scream, when the other party is doing something wrong. But what is key is being able to stand up to members of your own party when they do undemocratic things. Those people who don't do that, who don't stand up, who say, you know what, I'm going to lose my seat in the next election if these guys come after me. I don't like what they're doing, but in the interest of my career, I'm just going to be quiet and I'm just going to vote yes. Those are the people that make the difference in whether we hang on to a democracy or we do not. If the lessons that we've seen over and over again in Thailand, in France, in Germany, in Spain, there is a process. And the process of losing your democracy happens when there are people who are not willing to stand up to their tribe. And kids, like I said, I'm only at the second chapter, but what they are describing is eerily similar to what we are seeing now. Donald Trump can wave his hands and sign 1 million executive orders, but without the Republicans in the House and the Senate being willing to look the other way, it will be sound and fury signifying nothing. They are the ones who really give the power to somebody who wants to destroy our democracy by their acquiescence, turning the other cheek, pretending that it's okay, or even pretending that they agree. Those are the ones that will lead us to our downfall. And one of the other conclusions is that what you do to fight it is often an effort of grassroots. In Spain, they had a protest where 1 million people took to the streets in Madrid. That caused all the other political parties, except the most radical one, to fall into line. So kids, get your marching shoes. You already have your dialing finger. Your dialing finger should have a callus on it by now, because you're calling your state reps, you're calling your state senators, you're calling your congresspeople, particularly if you're in the sound of my voice and you might be a liberal, a progressive, a Democrat, but you live in an area that has Republican elected officials. That dialing finger of yours should have a callus on it by now. And if it doesn't, work toward that goal. And figure out what else you can do. Show up at the library board meetings, show up at the school board meetings, show up at the town hall, village hall, city manager meetings. There was we've shown you some of the audience reaction recently at town hall meetings held by Republican congresspeople who, for the most part, are being screamed at and yelled at and asked what they're going to do to stand up to Donald Trump. And rather than just looking out over the crowd and saying, you know what, here's what we can do, they're like, oh, no, everything's great. And the people scream and boo, oh, no, everything's great. You don't understand. Yeah, we do. One guy, after facing all of the yelling, said, well, let's just move on. And he got a whole nother wave of screaming and yelling. They care. These people with a less than optimal commitment to democracy, they care about themselves. They may not care one whit about Donald Trump. They may not even care one whit about you, but they care about keeping their jobs. And if they start to feel that their reelection effort is in serious jeopardy, that's when suddenly you're going to see them grow a spine. But they're only going to do that. Right now, they have got more pressure and more threats coming from Elon Musk and Donald Trump than coming from us. We have to tip those scales. We have to tip those scales. Remember, most politicians, their number one concern in the world is getting reelected. And whatever it takes to get reelected is what they are going to do. Forget about commitment to the Constitution. Forget about ideals. Forget about even morals. All that is transactional if it means that you will not get reelected. That's the bottom line. That's the kind of power we have, and we got to bring it. So, Resistance Central. Indivisible. Indivisible Chicago is having a rally tomorrow at noon at the Federal Plaza. This latest DOGE effort to dismantle our government is going after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Yeah, DOGE is saying, we don't need that. We're going to get rid of that. Yeah, you consumers, you silly consumers, you don't need any protection. Did you see yesterday where the Department of Justice had been pursuing charges against a financial institution that it said was using unfair practices in their loans and was just being deceptive to people who signed up for their loans? Yeah, that case got dropped. Pam Bondi, I guess, in her infinite wisdom, said, yeah, those sound like people who have money. We don't want to go after anybody who has money. They might donate to us. So, So the DOJ is not going to be looking out for your best interest. And DOGE wants to get rid of the Consumer Protection Bureau. Indivisible Chicago is going to rally tomorrow, Thursday, the 27th, at noon at the Federal Plaza to protest this. If you are going to be downtown tomorrow, if you live downtown tomorrow, please try to head over to the Federal Building at noon tomorrow. I'm sure that whatever protest there is will get coverage, but imagine what it'll be like. I mean, this is a weekday. It is at noon. It is downtown. It's not really easy for a lot of people. But if a lot of people show up, it's going to send a message. And we're going to have to do it over and over and over again. I've done it again. We have the phone lines open. Lady B is waiting to take your calls. The text line is already open. Before we start taking calls, though, Aaron Rupar does a Substack. He's been a fighter for democracy for a long time, and he's famous. If you are experienced in social media, he's famous for putting up clips. You know, there'll be a meeting of the Judiciary Committee and somebody says something, or there's a really passionate back and forth. Chances are he'll clip it and put it on social media. Adam Kinzinger reposted something from Aaron Rupar, who says that what the clip he pulled off is from Truth Social. He doesn't know if Donald Trump actually put together this ad or whether somebody else did and Donald Trump thought it was a fine thing, but this was from Truth Social, posted by Donald Trump. The audio speaks for itself, but you really should look up Aaron's social media and watch the video. It is essentially an ad for turning Gaza into a Trump resort. You remember he said that? He said that he wants the United States to take control of Gaza. He was a little unclear as to how that was going to happen. I think the implication was that Benjamin Netanyahu would simply sign the real estate over. I don't know whether they would sign the real estate over to the United States or Donald Trump personally. A year ago, you may remember, people laughed. They thought it was so silly. A year ago, Jared Kushner made some public statement about how Gaza would make a great resort area, great weather, right on the ocean. And people were like, yeah, Jared, right. Take those billions the Saudis gave you. Well, apparently that was not just a random thought. Or if it started as a random thought, it was a random thought that sunk deep into Trump's brain. And he said that he thinks the United States is going to somehow be gifted Gaza. The 1.8 million Palestinians who live there are going to be apparently forcibly relocated. And Donald Trump's going to develop Gaza. It seemed absurd on the face of it, but we've learned, you know, just because he says something that sounds crazy to you doesn't mean he isn't going to try to do it. So somebody put together this ad, and it starts off, the visuals start off by showing, you know, the Gaza that exists now, at least the portions of it that have been bombed into rubble, and people picking their way as they walk through these bombed out buildings. And then there's like a sunset or a sunrise, and the video transitions to palm trees and beautiful high-rises. And it appears to be an ad for Trump Gaza. You can hear the audio talk about Trump Gaza. I want to, before we start going to the phone lines, I want to play this. It's only like 30 seconds. Listen to this Trump Gaza ad.
Donald is coming to set you free, bringing the light for all to see. No more tunnels, no more fear. Trump Gaza is finally here. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, #1. Trump Gaza shining bright, golden future, a brand new life. Feast and dance, the deal is done. Trump Gaza, #1.
There you go. And whether or not Donald Trump was behind the production of that, he thought it was such a fine piece of video, he posted it on Truth Social, where Aaron Rupar grabbed it and reposted it. Okay. Just remember, it's hump day. It's all downhill from here. Let's go to the phone lines. Our good friend Paul from Seattle is on the line. Hey, Paul.
Hello, Joan.
How are you?
I don't think that Gaza can be signed over to the United States without the approval of Congress, and I don't think that Donald Trump can receive it as an emolument while he's president. I just don't think this is a legal deal. But even more disgusting is this. Earlier this week, the United States voted in the UN not to ask Russia to evacuate Ukraine. Because, as Donald Trump said, Ukraine started the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you have to have an IQ that's higher than 39 to know that makes no sense. Ukraine cannot start a war. They didn't invite Russia to, hey, come on over, let's fight.
Yep.
But here's the other thing. If they're going to have a deal where the United States takes their valuable minerals, that is, at the same time we say Russia doesn't have to leave, that's perpetuating a war for profit. I mean, you have, if you're going to say you need to pay us back, and Ukraine agrees, yeah, Russia has to leave. And otherwise you're just perpetuating, you have to give us more minerals if the war goes on. You have to pay us more, yet we're not asking Russia to leave. This is, first of all, that vote in the UN strikes me as aid and comfort to our adversary. That's treason. And this conflict of interest with the minerals is perpetuating conflict for profit, and that's a war crime. And I think really Democrats need to start talking with leadership, not about impeaching Donald Trump, but putting Donald Trump and Elon Musk and J.D. Vance on trial for treason. That's the kind of language. First of all, that's the kind of language that people in the red district appreciate, because they're always wanting to lock them up and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
they're pretty angry. I listened to the clips you played yesterday. People in the red district, I always say, a dog that bites will bite anyone. A dog that bites will bite anyone, even the master. And they are vicious, rabid dogs. And all you need to do is get them PO'd enough that what's going on and start using that kind of truculent and bellicose language. They will cotton right onto it.
Well, I've got to tell you, I think that some of our Democratic leaders are waking up to the fact that they need to do more. I don't know if you saw the exchange between Rachel Maddow and Hakeem Jeffries, because, when Hakeem Jeffries came here to Chicago as part of his book tour, Indivisible, I get their emails, and they were like, seriously, dude, the world is on fire, and you've decided to travel the country to sell books? And there was a protest, and Rachel asked him about that, about the fact that, regardless of how people feel about the Republicans, people really don't seem to feel like the Democrats are doing everything they can. And Hakeem looked, he's usually a pretty cool customer. He looked a little bit rattled. I mean, she was nice to him, but she was like, basically what she was saying is, dude, people want more. And he was like, yeah, I hear it. And we are rising to the occasion, and this and that and the other thing. So I guess we'll see.
Well, I don't know what is going on in the minds of the Democratic leadership. But yes, I did not see that appearance with Rachel, but I heard about it. I heard just like what you said. But they seem not to be able to, or we seem not to put people in leadership. And Chuck Schumer is the same. He's not quite as milquetoasty as Harry Reid, but Chuck Schumer is no slugger, He's no, and he just slides his glasses down to the ends of his nose and reads some other wonky thing. And I get a wonky email from Hakeem Jeffries every day. It's just not hitting the target. And it seems to me that there's something that happens with Democrats. And that is like the leadership turns out to be because it's your turn. I mean, think about it.
Yep.
Joe Biden was a great president. But when you think about the nomination process, it was kind of like, well, because it's his turn. And then knowing that he really wasn't going to be able to run for a second term, did not promote the vice president, Kamala Harris, and should have at least halfway through the term been putting her out front as the leader of the party. Joe Biden, of course, did not speak publicly very much. He should have been, because that's the new style. the appointment of Merrick Garland.
But he was so mired. We got to get to a break. I agree with you. He was so mired in the way that they've always done things, and he just really could not adapt to the times. He really couldn't. And, I don't think his staff did him any favors in that department either. Thank you, Paul, for the call. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more calls after this.
You know that you can listen to Chicago's Progressive Talk on WCPT AM 820. Stream us live at WCPT820.com and on the TuneIn Radio app. Or you can ask Alexa, Siri, or Google to play WCPT from TuneIn. But now you have another option. We're simulcasting our programming overnights, 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. on WSBC AM 1240 for a clearer reception in and around the city. Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820. And now overnights on WSBC 1240 AM, where facts matter.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
It is the first hour of our day. We are talking to you. We are taking your calls. Let's go back to the phone lines right now. Dave from Hoffman Estates is on the line. Hey, Dave, how are you today?
Hey, Joan. Happy Wednesday, by the way, dear.
Thank you.
I don't know, did you happen to catch the news again this morning where they had another near miss, this time at Washington National?
To pile on top of the one that took place at Midway yesterday, Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, 7 now, and since this guy's been in?
Somebody I follow on social media now refers to Trump as the plane crash president.
Wow.
Yeah, well, you know what? Here's the thing that people are discovering. If you don't really spend any time thinking about government and what it does, it's easy to think, oh, my gosh, they've got thousands of employees. Well, what are they doing? They're all just like, at the copy machine, But we are learning bit by bit about what those employees actually do. That, that if you want your Social Security check to go out on time, there is a bureaucrat for that. You want your planes to land safely, there's a bureaucrat for that.
Yeah, perhaps, you got a little better memory on this one, but remember when Reagan had fired all those PATCO that time, and I don't recall it was this many, close calls or plane wrecks. Do you?
No. We haven't had this many incidents in a very, very long time.
Yeah, and it just, I don't know. I'm not too anxious to go flying anytime soon. I don't care how they say it's so much safer and whatever, but I'm not going to,
Yeah, I'm supposed to go see my daughter in California next week, so we're just going to cross our fingers, maybe light a candle, and get on that American Airlines plane.
Wow.
But you know what? In the past, I never thought twice about it. This time, I'm thinking to myself, well, okay, the odds are with you. Chances are nothing will happen. Chances are nothing will happen. Chances are nothing will happen.
Yeah.
Let's hope I'm right.
Yes, well, we hope so. So we get to talk to you again, and not through a seance or nothing like that.
Yeah, really. Yeah, that would be awful. Thanks, Dave.
But yes, it would. But like you were talking about that thing going on tomorrow. A friend of mine his grandson works at a food producing place here in the northwest suburbs, and they were talking something where he works at, that the Hispanic workers were talking about doing a walkout tomorrow. I believe he said it was tomorrow. Because there was something, that's what he had said, that I picked up on. And they had said that because I guess it might be their way of kind of protesting after ICE had picked some people up that may have not been legal. But I kept thinking, how could they get hired without the E-Verify, though? I don't know, but that's what he said. We'll find out if that's true or not.
Yeah.
But anyway, I don't want to say no more because if it was just a lot of woof. But and I do know that they're not they're a non-union place, so it didn't have to worry about nothing about wildcat strike or not. But anyway, if it does happen, You heard it here.
Yeah, and I want to say to you, Dave, and to anybody who's listening, if you belong to an activist group, if you belong to a Democratic group, and you guys are planning some kind of activity, march, protest, boycott, whatever, send me a text, okay? And since I've now designated my show to be Resistance Central, we're going to try to publicize those things. Thanks, Dave.
Hey, Joan, let me pause real quick when you guys were mentioning about Vice President Harris. Now, my thoughts were, would she have ever been if Biden would have kept his word and been the bridge for the younger ones? And that they would have had
that's
a
a really good question. I mean, I'm sure she would have been in the running. Would someone else have emerged? I'm sure there would have been a lot of people. If he'd have, after the midterms, if he'd have said, told you I was going to be a transition president, that's what I'm going to be. You know, let's talk about, you know, the Democratic Party and this country moving forward. And I think we would have had a lot of Democrats who wanted to be a part of that.
But if you recall right, she bailed in South Carolina in the primaries before the votes were even taken that time when she was running against Biden.
You mean the first time?
Yeah, that she never even stayed in long enough to, go get elected.
I was talking to a political operative about that, and they said, you might hear a presidential candidate say, they've changed their mind. They want to spend more time with their family. They want to pursue other interests. He said, what motivates a candidate at that high level to end their campaign is a lack of funds. So, Kamala she obviously got enough donations to make it to the debate stage, but clearly, especially with so many people, the funds dried up. And, that's reality. If the money's not there for your run. I mean, Paul Vallis, before he ran for mayor last time against Brandon Johnson, his name had been floated as a contender for a long time. And he told me privately, he said, minimally, you need a war chest of $7 or $8 million to just get into the race to be Chicago's next mayor. And he said, I don't have that kind of money. Somebody, a donor, who wants to see me as mayor says, okay, here's $8 million, Paul. He said, that's what makes the difference. I think she didn't have the money to keep going.
Yeah, well, as you can see what's going on with Musk. I mean, these people, they're afraid to cross Trump or whatever, that they got Musk with that heavy money who will just, make them do one. Anyway, let me clear off. You got others, but I just thought I'd share that with you. Be well, Joe.
Yes. Thank you. Let's go back to the phone lines. I think we got time. Dan from Oak Brook is on the line. Hey, Dan, thanks for the call today.
Hi, Joan. How are you? Listen, I wanted to talk about this. My son-in-law is a federal employee. He's got 14 years with Social Security. For 13 of them, he commuted from Romeoville all the way down to Chicago Heights. And he worked helping these lower-income people get their Social Security, their benefits, all that stuff. And then he got promoted about a year ago, and now he works downtown. But he's on the chopping block. And the rumor is that they're about to cut 50% across the board of the federal employees. And Joan, this is obscene. My son-in-law is a single dad raising 2 kids, and he's been a model employee at Social Security. And we have the richest man in the world, Joan, lining out regular people's jobs, and he seems to be almost getting off to it, enjoying it. You saw him holding that chainsaw up in the air. Yeah. But this is disgusting, Joan. And where are the Democrats? Why don't they fight for these people?
Why not? Why aren't they screaming every single day? I agree with you, and I think we're starting to see more of that. There are a few people you can count on. Chris Murphy, Cory Booker, but it hasn't yet peaked. And I think I think we are going to be hearing more from our elected officials. But, I made a speech to the McHenry County Democratic women on Saturday, and I said to them, don't count on your elected officials to save you. Look at the person to your left and look at the person to your right. Those are the people who are going to save you. We are going to save ourselves.
And Joan, where is Dick Durbin? Where are these people? And the thing of it is that, well, I'll give you another example. I just heard on the news, right now there are 4 park rangers for the entire Yellowstone out there in Wyoming. 4 park rangers is all they've got left. And they have really gone to town on the national parks and all of that. Mm-hmm. And anyway, but Joan, there has to be did you hear what the head of the one who wrote Project 2025 for the Heritage Foundation, this Kevin Roberts, he said recently that this is going to be a second American Revolution, and it will remain bloodless as long as the left allows it to be. But these people are not playing, Joan.
No, they are not. They are not playing. Dan, thank you so much for the call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got to get to a break. We'll be back with more after this.
If you've missed any of today's show, you can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Amazon, or HeartlandSignal.com. Just search for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Chicago's Progressive Talk, WCPT 820, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito. Join the conversation now at 773-763-9278.
I'm trying to use the phone!
Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
We're talking about the news of the day. We are taking your calls and reading your texts. I got this text, which I really like. The leadership are not the leaders. We are. They follow us. The leadership are the fundraisers. That is very true. That is very, very true. Let's go to our good friend Roosevelt, who's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Roosevelt, how are you?
Joan, thank you for taking my call. Okay, have you seen the latest video from David Schuster? He played a video.
No.
I'm sorry. Okay, he played a video of Trump supporters burning Trump flags, blue flags with white letters, and blaming all this on Elon Musk. So, do you think that there's something
Where did this take place? Do you know, Roosevelt?
No, I have no idea. I just saw it like earlier this morning, and I really didn't pay that much attention. But I saw 2 guys burning the flag, one of those medium-sized flags, not the big ones, but one of those medium-sized flags. And they were blaming it on Musk. So you think something is brewing within their, let's say, mutual understanding?
Well, see, I've always believed that even though Elon Musk is using Donald Trump is also using Elon Musk, because Donald Trump doesn't want to take the heat for the bad things that he knows will be wildly unpopular. So he's letting Elon Musk create the chaos. Elon Musk's flying monkeys are the ones that are, getting into the servers. And even though at the cabinet meeting today, because, some of his cabinet officials told people in their departments that they did not have to respond to this Elon Musk email that he sent out, says basically, tell me what you do. Tell me what your job is. Tell me everything you've done in the last week. And Donald Trump, at his first cabinet meeting today, which was attended by Elon, so of course he can't say anything bad about Elon to his face because he's not brave, he told his cabinet that if you don't like Elon and you don't like what he's doing, you might as well resign your cabinet seat right now, because that was a requirement. But I think as much as he likes Elon's money. Elon is also providing cover for him, because if Elon really goes so far and there really is a revolt and Republicans start falling away, then Donald Trump has a scapegoat. Oh, you know, Elon, he has a good heart and good intentions, but he went too far, so he's no longer going to do X, Y, or Z. I'm going to take it over, and you know me, I'm better. It's for Donald Trump, it's a win-win.
You know what, Joan? When you played that video, that new video that you just played on Gaza, on what Trump wants to do with Gaza, you know, you came to mind, and you've always said that he's spreading himself, he's overplaying his hand, that he's spread himself thin. And so look what he's doing. He's all the federal, I mean, we're most unsafe so-called big power or number one power in the world. You just said it. Something about Yellowstone. There's 4 people, you know, looking over Yellowstone. So he's cutting it all. I mean, he's cutting everybody up. I mean, federal, you name it, you know. So where are we at? Can you imagine if a Democrat did that? Can you imagine if that was Biden?
Yeah.
I mean,
that's because we have a bunch of leaders who are finding it difficult not to play by the rules that were set up 2 decades ago. We're a believer in norms. We're a believer in the rule of law. And when the other side doesn't play by the same rules, it's a very uneven battle.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Joan. Thanks, for
Roosevelt.
your time.
Appreciate the
Have
call.
a nice day.
Yeah.
You too. Bye-bye.
Let's go to our good friend Jim, who's on the line from Chicago. Hey, Jim. Are you having a great day today?
Oh, everyone's great. Everyone's great. But, outrage after outrage. But what I would like to hear is to identify the Russian high schooler that put the deep state into the vernacular, because he's the one that deserves the award. I'm sure that came from Russia. And they ran on the deep state with no definition of this fiction of a deep state.
Yeah.
Trump continues it with these woke people and these leftists and so on and so forth, which is absolutely absurd. But think of that term, Joe. Where did it come from, the deep state? I mean, I heard that maybe, maybe 8 years ago. I started hearing the deep state on some of the Republican radios. Bongino, believe it or not, under Cash Patel, 2 of the unbelievable for the FBI. I think he was to pump that, the deep state, referring to saying that the deep state are Democrats, evil Democrats, or Democrats that go to work in the morning and cook up evil things to do.
Yeah, they do. That's their whole job. I'm in charge of evil things.
Exactly. I don't have. You're right. I get up in the morning. It's easy to be evil. I mean, I get up in the morning. Oh, I'm an evil Democrat. I'm going to see what I can do to steer the United States in one direction or another. But just that term, Joe, the fiction of that term and the way they've used it as a battering ram is incredible. Mm-hmm. I'm sure the historians, because that's really a word that no one can define, but people believe it. They believe that the deep state fixed the election in 2020. These are regular people on the street. They believe in this deep state theory that the Democrats are evil and that they'll go to any extent to stop. It's not even a party anymore. Joel Osteen said it beautifully yesterday. We're not down to 2 parties any longer. We're somewhere else. We're in another atmosphere here because. This is I don't know what you would call it, but they use it very effectively.
It's a MAGA cult. That's what I think it is. It's not even really a political party because they don't have platforms. They're not centered around ideas or policies, things they want to accomplish. It's just the will of Donald Trump, and whatever Donald Trump wants is fine with them. It's a cult of personality.
Yeah, but Joan, remember, he wouldn't admit that he knew anything. I'm sure he didn't read Project 2025, and I'm sure he didn't know intimately Musk or any of these people, really. I mean, these people just, like, popped into the Mar-a-Lago and filled his empty head, which is so empty, with whatever they could get away with. And as long as he thinks that his followers, his loyal followers, will go along with anything he does, and what a perfect way to weave your web. And you've got somebody who believes in this individual, and so you can pump anything into the system, our system. Anyway, Joan, have a great show. It's just too much. Every day's an outrage. Every minute's an outrage. And what's really sad about it,
you got to pace yourself. That's what I'm trying to do. When I read for hours before I go on the air, and there's a lot of stuff going on that's bad, and I have to pick and choose. I would rather focus on one or two things than try to do the litany of outrage, because that's, that could take me my entire show every day. But we're going to focus on different things. Yeah. We're all going to find our area of interest, and we are going to fight like hell. Thank you, Jim.
You're welcome.
All righty. Somebody texted in. They wanted me to mention that book that I was reading. It's called Tyranny of the Minority. Tyranny of the Minority. Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Zyblatt are the authors. Tyranny of the Minority. And like I said, I'm only, about a fifth of the way through the book, but, they're starting off by saying, okay, Spain had a democracy and lost it. Here's how. France's democracy faltered. Here's why it faltered. This is Thailand had a democracy and has not been able to hang on to it solidly. Here's what happened in Germany. And it's like they're talking about what is happening now. Change the name of the country, maybe change the name of a person here or there. It is amazing. I will, like I said, I'm a fifth of the way through. I plan to keep reading it, and we'll share more. But I strongly urge you to take a peek. I read a lot of political books, and this one breaks through. So I hope you pick it up. Let's take another phone call. Marty is on the line from Worth, Illinois. Hey, Marty, how are you?
As good as you can be, I suppose, right? I mean, I woke up breathing. I broke my personal record of number of consecutive days alive, so that's a reason to celebrate, right? Why not? And to that point, it seems like the brown shirts are just wearing red hats now. It's just the same playbook. But what I wanted to comment on was was that video clip that was posted. A, I'm in disbelief, and B, why would the commander-in-chief purposely, intentionally antagonize our adversaries for absolutely no good reason at all? Nobody who would respect the military would ever intentionally aggravate that situation. I mean, these people have lost their lives, their homes. Generations of families, have just been eviscerated. And you want to, if you've ever wanted a better reason to give our adversaries reason to, and we wouldn't even know it now anyway because we just fired the intelligence staff. It's like it is mind-boggling. Just how bad all of this is, and I mean, why would anybody who's in that position of power intentionally aggravate? I mean, who knows how many countless terrorist groups out there that could just use that video as their propaganda. I mean, it is unbelievable that he would do something that irresponsible, I mean, and we should all be outraged at this kind of stuff. This cannot be normalized.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, and that's what we have to make sure. There are, like I said, there are a lot of politicians who only care about their own position, their own personal power, and they will look the other way if they feel it is in their best interest to hang on to their job. That's the bottom line. That's the power that we really have to make sure they understand, that we are not going to vote them back into office. We are absolutely not. And so they better change their tune. That's what's going to make a difference. I think that's going to be the key.
And demanding like voter reforms here. I mean, the stuff that Greg Palast is talking about. I mean, that is straight out Orwellian. Like where people can just knock other people off the voting rolls, and then you have to present your birth certificate in order to prove that you're able to vote. You know, which half of us wouldn't be, which costs money. So it's essentially a poll tax. But it's like we're at this point where we need some fundamental changes even to our voting system so that our votes actually do count, and we do have the opportunity to get these people out of there. You know. I agree, Marty. Thank you so much for the call. I appreciate it. Real quick, I want to get to one more text. I was talking about how Donald Trump was putting up with Elon Musk because Elon Musk is doing all the bad stuff, and if it goes awry, he has a ready-made scapegoat. And I do think that's true, but somebody else pointed out that Donald Trump cannot cut himself off from Elon's money. And I think, that's the bottom line. Donald Trump is not going to share the spotlight with anybody except somebody who is richer than he is. Remember, even in his first term as president, he used to have people that was reported he had people he would call and ask their advice, and they were all people who were much wealthier than him. He is enamored of money and wealth, and he is going to play second fiddle to Elon, not only because he's going to be available as a scapegoat should that be needed, but also, he doesn't want the money pipeline cut off any more than anybody else. I agree with you. We are going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Remember when you get to work to hop over to WCPT820.com or the TuneIn Radio app and stream The Stephanie Miller Show. Weekdays 8 to 11 a.m. on Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. Because facts matter. You're listening to WCPT 820.
Time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you. From, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Not only, as you heard at the top of the hour for the Associated Press, are government agencies cutting people, they are trying to take big cuts out of programs. Some programs that were considered untouchable now seem to be very, very, very much touchable. Joining me now is Alex Lawson, Executive Director of Social Security Works. Alex, it's not a great day for people who love Social Security.
Yeah, I'd say it's not a great few weeks here, but I will also say that the people who love Social Security is the vast majority of the American people. This is a beloved program, so really it's a bad couple of weeks for the American people.
I noticed that there was one Republican who voted with the Democrats not to accept this budget, and I was a little bit surprised. One Republican who'd been very public in saying they weren't going to vote for it if there were cuts to, Medicare and Medicaid, Rob Brejnahan, who he's a Republican who represents a swing state in Pennsylvania. And I also heard sound clips where one Republican earlier yesterday was saying, well, there's 5 of us who are not voting for this. I don't know why Mike Johnson seems to be in such a rush to bring the bill to the floor. But apparently, I don't know if deals were struck, but certainly pressure was brought to bear. And Rob Brejnahan fell into line voting for this new budget. So since the Republicans aren't going to save us, what are we looking at in this new budget? What are we looking at as far as Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security so far? Not that they can't do more damage later, Alex, because we know that's possible, but what are we looking at right now?
So, yeah, it's really complicated on purpose, right? They make it esoteric so that only the high priest and priestesses of Washington, D.C. know what's going on. Luckily, there's a few of us with tribunes of the people also keeping an eye on it. So I don't want to make it too complicated. But what passed yesterday is called the resolution. It actually didn't have specifics, and it's not the actual reconciliation bill. It's not the particulars. What it does is it instructs the committees to put those particulars down. So think of it as the starting gun. There's a large distance they have to cover from yesterday when every single Republican voted to cut $890 billion from Medicaid, thereby destroying the program, throwing millions of people out or stealing their health care, closing nursing homes across this country. Medicaid serves seniors, children, people with disabilities. The lone Republican who voted against the resolution, which again is like a starting gun and a map. It's not the actual budget. That comes later. The lone Republican who voted against it, he voted against it because it didn't cut enough. So he didn't vote against it because he was worried. No, all of the Republicans who are in tight districts, there's 17 of them are so-called frontliners, and they all voted for this. And just one little example, like take Iowa's 1st district, Representative Miller Meeks. She won by 799 votes. 799 votes. If the resolution, the way it's set up, actually makes it across the finish line, 66,000 people in her district lose their health care. 799 votes is what she has. So you can just expect all 17 of them, they're going to lose their jobs. But the thing is, they're cowards. They're more scared of King Elon Musk and his puppet President Donald Trump than they are of their constituents. That's why they fell in line. It's as simple as that. Cowardice and greed.
Well, that's what I see. But I'm surprised if you represent a district that isn't solidly red, how do you go home after voting for things that are going to hurt the very people you purport to represent? I know that Elon Musk has a lot of money and has personally threatened the political careers of more than one official. But, you know, it's sort of like a lose-lose for them. Disagree with Elon, and he's going to make sure you're primaried. Don't disagree with Elon, and your constituents aren't going to vote for you. I mean, I guess they're still more worried about him than they're worried about us.
It is what it is. They're more worried about their donors than the people. But you know what? The game's not over. Like, the race has still got many legs here. The next thing that happens is these instructions go to committee. For example, Energy and Commerce is the committee that actually has to specify the $890 billion in Medicaid cuts. Now, that same representative I talked about earlier from Iowa's 1st District, Representative Miller Meeks, she serves on Energy and Commerce, and you can bet your bottom dollar that Social Security Works, my organization, and our partners on the ground in Iowa are going to be making a ruckus. We've got a billboard truck that we're sending eminently to her district. We're going to go to every single Social Security office, nursing home in her district to let people know that she's voting to steal 66,000 people's health care in her district. She's voting to close the 15 nursing homes in her district. And we feel like we can pressure her and make sure that she's hearing more from her constituents than from Donald Trump and Elon Musk, maybe even enough to stop this thing in her committee. So that's the next thing that we're going to fight. all of those on the committees. It'll have to come back to the floor. We've got multiple chances to slow this thing down, to make it less bad, but you can't take away from the fact that every single Republican yesterday voted to destroy Medicaid. The one who voted against it voted because it wasn't destroying it enough.
That is just horrifying. It is absolutely horrifying. I'm speaking to Alex Lawson, Executive Director of Social Security Works. We are going to take a real quick break. We're going to be back with more after this.
There's no excuse to miss Joan Esposito.
It's number one on my stereo.
Live, local, and progressive. You can listen to her daily at WCPT820.com on your computer or phone.
Hey, Google, play WCPT.
Streaming Chicago's progressive talk from TuneIn.
Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by Alex Lawson, who is with a group that is working to protect Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Alex is Executive Director of Social Security Works. And I correct me if I'm wrong, Alex, but isn't Scott Perry, Republican Scott Perry in the House, one of the people who you think might be a pressure point?
Yes, he won by 11,000 votes. He would rip 59,000. He'd rip health care away from 59,000 of his constituents. So we are letting his constituents know right now.
And how do you get that message out?
So we have a variety of tactics. Sort of tried and true one. We run billboard trucks through their districts. We go to Medicaid offices, Social Security offices, their district offices. We go to nursing homes, places where seniors, people with disabilities are. We also partner with our allies on the ground. There's been protests in Scott Perry's district, in Miller Meek's districts, in the districts of these Republicans. They're too big cowards to actually have town halls, so we have to actually go there and try to create some news on the ground. And so partnering with our allies, getting people into the street, driving phone calls from constituents into their offices, and otherwise just making sure that the press is telling the right story. Because one of the things, if you watched yesterday, the news, the way the Republicans got this across the finish line for this first starter gun is they spent all day lying about that it wouldn't cut Medicaid, right? And the press just they didn't push back. They'd go on TV and they're like, you show me where it says Medicaid in the bill. And the press just let it go. They're like, oh, I guess that's right. You can point in the bill. You can point in the resolution. You're like right there where it says find $890 billion in cuts to Medicaid, instructions to the Energy and Commerce Committee. You can look at their menu of options. They wrote it down. They wrote down what they're going to do, but the press just let them get away with this sort of, bravado, like it doesn't cut Medicaid. Well, guess what?
Do you think that's just because of the people covering this didn't have good information? Were they just lazy? Have we come to a time when nobody wants to challenge anybody lest they be iced out, like the Associated Press has been iced out of the White House?
Little column A, B, and C is what I think, Joan. And I think that you have a lot of really amazing, brave reporters, but you also have some who are much more interested in sweetening their beat than they are in telling the truth. You just saw today the owner of the Washington Post just changed and said from now on we're going to only be pushing right-wing talking points in our opinion section. The opinion editor resigned over that. So it's also who owns the corporate media, right? Like whose story are they telling? And when they're owned by who owns Twitter, right? Why did Elon Musk spend all of those billions to buy Twitter? It's to flood the zone with their propaganda. But here's the hopeful part. The next phase, they have to actually write down the actual cuts. We will be able to calculate the exact amount of people in writing exactly of what these proposed cuts are. And at that point, the press hopefully will, when they say, where is it written down, they'll just be like, right there. It's written down right there. But in the meantime, we're going to take the message directly to the people. And I'll say local press has been doing a really good job. And those the Republicans in those frontline districts are terrified. There's all those news stories coming down to the vote about them being like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And they were massaged into voting for it with promises that the Senate would make it better, or don't worry about it because, we're going to change it as it goes. But the truth is that as long as Wall Street continues to demand its blood sacrifice of cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, just turn on the financial press and you'll see it every day. If they give this $4.5 trillion tax handout, which is what it's all about, tax handout to Elon Musk and his billionaire buddies, they have to make massive cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, or the bond rates will skyrocket and rich people will lose out. So they demand the cuts, and in order to give those tax handouts to billionaires.
Yep. You mentioned before that when you go to a place to make sure that the populace knows what their legislators are doing, that you partner with allies. Who are some of the allies that you work with?
There's a ton of local organizations. A lot of them are parts of different networks. Indivisible, for example, has chapters all over the country, and they're made up of some of the greatest people that I've met. We ourselves have seniors councils in almost every state in the country. It's different in each state, but the most important thing for people who want to fight back is to understand that you're not alone. It's to get organized. You have to get organized. Find the people in your neighborhood, in your community, who are fighting back, and stand shoulder to shoulder with them. You can start at socialsecurityworks.org. That's my organization, but also I really recommend Indivisible. They have an enormous amount of chapters doing great work across the country, and there's a host of other organizations. But the key is we find our strength in solidarity, and they want us to feel isolated. They want us to feel like there's nothing we can do to fight back. But in fact, we have all of the power. They've got money, but we've got people.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel we have been getting enough from Democrats who are in elected office?
No. I think that you've seen some leadership. I feel like Senator Bernie Sanders' anti-oligarchy tour, he's going to districts that, are very marginal for the Republicans, and he has thousands and thousands of people turn out in those districts. You see Robert Garcia, AOC, there's Greg Casar, Pramila Jayapal. There's a handful, Mark Pocan. There's a handful of people who are doing amazing work. But generally, the truth is that politicians are lagging indicators. They're not going to show the leadership. There is no cavalry coming. And although that might be terrifying in a sort of way, it should be empowering as well, because we are the cavalry. The people is where the leadership, the bravery, and the power comes from. Once we raise our voices together, when we have millions of people raising our voices together, then the politicians will find their bravery and they'll stand with us, and we will be happy when that happens. But for the moment, the opposition is coming from the grassroots, and we just have to keep turning the volume and intensity up and just standing shoulder to shoulder, raising our voices, reminding the Republicans, these are bullies that we're talking to, reminding them that all power is with the people. And fascism is stopped by millions of normal, everyday people saying no. No, I'm not going to let you steal my Social Security, my Medicare, my Medicaid that my family relies on. so that you can give these giant tax handouts to billionaires to buy another golden yacht or whatever it is that they do with their money. That's what I count on.
The Social Security is not a handout. It's something we've paid into over our working life with the expectation that that money is going to be returned to us. Social Security, if not Medicare and Medicaid, but at least Social Security was always the third rail of politics. You mess with it at your peril. I think we could add Medicare I think we could put Medicare down as a third rail, that you mess with it at your peril. Why is it that the current Republican leadership seems to think that this time's different? This time they can get away with it. People are just ill-informed. They're too stupid. They know Fox Cable's going to be on their side. I don't understand how they think they can vote against these programs and continue on in office. Got any insight there?
It's because they're very, very stupid. Not in a, IQ way. They're very stupid in understanding the American people way. They've got, the donor class down. They know what they need to do to get on Fox News or One American News or whatever, but they don't understand the ferocity with which the American people will absolutely stand up and fight back. But the one thing I disagree with the setup is it's Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. That is the third rail. People understand Medicaid is the largest provider of long-term care in this country, that 62% of people in nursing homes are reliant on Medicaid. There's millions and millions, tens of millions of families, because it provides health care to 70 million people, tens of millions of families who realize that without Medicaid, they'd be forced to foot the bill for nursing home care, which averages $100,000 a year, or their loved one is coming home with dementia, right? And they're supposed to just figure out how to care for them at home. They can't. They can't. And there's been a cultural change to understand that just like Medicare, just like Social Security, Medicaid is ours. It's part of a larger system that we pay into. It's ours. It's not politicians in Washington, D.C. Who can take it away. And so I think that the raw stupidity of the people in Washington, D.C., the Republican politicians, who think that they can get away with destroying these absolutely beloved programs. Medicaid, 85% of everyone loves Medicaid and do not want to see a single penny cut from Medicaid. Over 50% say that the federal government doesn't spend enough right now on Medicaid. So the thing is that what the money and, what Wall Street and the people who dance to their tune have is this enormous propaganda machine. And mainly what it does is it tells people, don't believe your eyes and ears. We promise that we're not going to do this as they're doing it. But the thing is, once you actually do something to someone, right, once you fired 2,400 veterans from the VA, once people actually realize that this is real, this is happening, they can't put the toothpaste back into the tube. They can't just keep lying they will try, but their lies will wear off and the enormous backlash will build.
Yeah. I certainly hope so. A while back, Ezra Levin, who with his wife put out the very first Indivisible guide when Trump was elected the first time, he said something that I actually had forgotten. He said that when Trump was elected the first time, it was not the Democratic leadership who led the charge in opposition and trying to thwart him. It was the grassroots that only after thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people went to their legislators' offices and marched and took to the streets that the Democratic lawmakers sort of woke up to this idea of resistance. Do you think that will happen this time as well?
That is what always happens. Bravery comes from the people. Once we've got the people arrayed and marching in the street. The politicians will gladly join us as we go, but we can't wait for anyone to lead us. We are going to have to lead ourselves. But luckily, millions and millions and millions of people are willing to stand up and fight back against this enormous attack on democracy and things that we hold dear. Just today, the Trump administration said that they're going to fire 50% of the people who work in the Social Security Administration. Just a couple weeks ago, they said they were going to close every Social Security field office. You tell me what the reaction to that is going to be all around the country, People right now say it's too hard to get information that they need about their Social Security. What about when there's no one working there anymore? What about when there's no more Social Security office? Elon Musk says they're going to replace it with AI. Have you ever tried to call Google or Facebook or one of these Silicon Valley companies? That's what they want for Social Security. They want to just rip it away from you and make it impossible for you to fight back. Well, what we're going to do is stop them from doing that. So I'm incredibly certain that the American people will stand up, will fight back, and will win. And we just have to understand solidarity grows through adversity, and just bank on that. Don't let the bullies grind us down.
Alex Lawson, Executive Director of Social Security Works. Thank you so much, Alex. We will continue this conversation over the next year, 2 years, until this ship rights itself. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Katherine Stewart, author of a book called Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Right after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Just before the 2020 election, journalist Katherine Stewart released a book called The Power Worshippers. Well, now there is a new book, a follow-up. It's called Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. It just published this month, and Katherine is here to talk with us about it. Katherine, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, let's talk about the movement to destroy American democracy. Are they doing it on purpose, or is it just going to fail as they dismantle government in their efforts to achieve all the things Donald Trump wants to achieve? Is it going to be a byproduct of what they're doing, or is there an actual effort to undo our democracy?
There's an actual effort to undo our democracy. They told us well before the election in documents like Project 2025 that they were going to smash the institutions that safeguard our democracy. And that's exactly what they're doing now. And it's kind of, we've heard that they were going to do it, but the pace of events is actually a bit faster than one might have anticipated. But again, this time they had 4 years to plan out this moment. It's kind of shocking to see it, happening before our eyes. But it didn't come as a surprise to those of us who have been watching this movement and its different factions.
You've used a phrase that I'd like you to explain, the engine of unreason. What do you mean by that?
Well, this is a movement that has frankly declared a war on the truth. It is another phrase I use is reactionary nihilism. This is a movement that basically has set itself against the idea that there is any real value in the principles of democracy. any value in the principles of equality and pluralism and justice and rule of law that represent the best of the American promise. They instead of trying to advance toward or progress toward a better state, this movement emphasizes a return to some imaginary version of an allegedly better past, a past that includes elements of regressive social order, such as gender hierarchies and suppression of certain forms of speech and certain forms of political opposition, a movement that wants to attack the religious liberty of those who fail to conform. And they use lies or conscious disinformation to separate a large sector of the American electorate from the facts in order to manipulate them and control them.
What prompted you, to put together this book and release it right here, right now? What is the overarching message that you are trying to get at?
Well, I titled the book, let's start there. I titled the book Money, Lies, and God, because first, money is a huge part of the story, meaning that huge concentrations of wealth have destabilized the political system in some really interesting ways. You have funders at the top sort of investing in the dismantling of democracy. Second, lies or disinformation, propaganda is another huge feature of the movement. And God, because religious nationalism is another huge feature. I would say religious nationalism is the most important ideological framework for the largest part of this movement. And listen, Money, Lies, and God is my third book on this topic. The first book I published in 2012 was about the religious rights war on public education, something we're seeing intensify as time passes. The Power Worshippers, which is my last book, was really looking very deeply at the infrastructure of the Christian nationalist movement. But then as I kept doing research and learning more about the different factions of the movement and was following the rise of another movement called the New Right, which is adjacent to the religious right, but not quite the same thing. There's a lot of overlap, but they're separate in certain ways. I thought this is a much bigger picture, and I really needed to focus on the fact that this movement is radically anti-democratic and really wants to destroy our democracy, and frankly, that's what we're seeing happen in real time.
Christian nationalism doesn't seem to have anything to do with the basic teachings of Christianity. Some people have said that it's actually a misleading title because it implies that there's some religious connection when actually it's more a far-right sort of fascist kind of movement. Would you agree with that statement?
I leave it to the theologians to decide what counts as true Christianity and what doesn't. I will note that there are huge numbers of American Christians who are absolutely opposed to this movement, and many faith leaders have organized against it. I think of groups, I'll just throw out a few names. I think of Christians Against Christian Nationalism, or I think about groups like the Baptist Joint Committee or Vote Common Good or the New Evangelicals. There are so many others. In my last book, the subtitle was Inside the Dangerous Rise of Religious Nationalism, and I used that term to draw attention to the similarities that different forms of religious nationalism have around the world. This is not remotely unique to America or unique to Christianity.
Really?
So when you have leaders...
Can you give me some of those examples of this sort of thing around the world? I mean, are you talking
Absolutely.
about... I'll let you answer.
When you talk about leaders like Vladimir Putin in Russia or Viktor Orban in Hungary, or when you talk about a leader like Erdogan in Turkey, or if you're talking about leaders in Iran, when they want to consolidate more authoritarian forms of political power and exert a tighter and tighter grip on their population, they bind themselves very tightly, these leaders, to ultra-conservative religious figures in their own countries in order to consolidate that really strict authoritarian kind of power. What they're doing is they're bubble wrapping themselves in sanctimony. They're saying, you can't touch me because I've got the holy men on my side. And then it becomes more difficult to investigate their corruption, any money that they're stealing from the public treasury, the way that they may be funneling money toward their cronies and family members. And it also inhibits any investigation of the abuses that they're perpetrating against their own people. So these countries could be described as theocracies in a certain fake sense, and that there's an official religion, and depending on what part of the world we're talking about, their laws may be based on the holy book, on their holy text. But I think they're more accurately described as cronyistic kleptocracies with absolute suppression of free speech and very little tolerance for political opposition.
Would you say that one of the goals here of the religious nationalists is to eliminate the separation of church and state, or at least blur the lines to the point where nobody can tell where they are anymore?
Absolutely. They often say that separation of church and state is a myth, and they have various ways of saying that. They're really trying to impose their idea of what's righteous on everybody else. They adhere to this incredibly anti-democratic idea, which is that the United States is not founded on any principles, but on a specific religion and cultural heritage, which it isn't. It's the idea that America is on the brink of an apocalypse owing to the rise of equality, which they can't tolerate, and what they call wokeness, which is basically anything they don't like. It's the idea that democracy won't be able to solve the problems that we have, and the idea that the rules don't apply anymore, and what they need is a strong man, an authoritarian leader who's going to put himself above the law, seize the reins of power, and scrap the law in favor of the iron fist. So, you know, in sum, it's the idea that democracy in the sense of government of the people and respecting individual rights in a pluralistic society, it's the idea that this kind of government doesn't work. They want to smash it up and create something new, an autocracy with theocratic features.
We are going to take a break. I'm talking to Katherine Stewart. Her newest book is Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Very timely book. We'll talk more about it when we come right back after this.
Podcasts of Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, are available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Amazon. Just search for Joan Esposito.
WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Joining me is Katherine Stewart, author of several books, most recently Money, Lies, and God, Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Katherine, where did you go and who did you talk to get the information that you used to write this book?
Thank you for that question. I have spent the last 16 years attending a lot of right-wing strategy gatherings and conferences and summits and marches and speaking to members of the rank and file, speaking to many of parts of the leadership cadre. I'm an investigative journalist. I've always thought you don't really know what's happening unless you're in the room. So I just go places where I'm allowed to go. I buy my tickets to these conferences like anyone can. I also spend a lot of time reading the movements, you know, the books that the movement leaders write, watching them on podcasts, listening to them on their various channels that they use to disseminate their ideas. So I have attended Moms for Liberty conferences, stops on the Reawaken America tour, Marches for Life. I've been to Road to Majority conferences. Last December, I attended America Fest, 20,000 of the hardcore MAGA supporters in Phoenix, Arizona, a conference put on by Turning Point USA. And I'll tell you, it was really interesting when to go back to what they say about religion. Leaders of this movement, especially at Turning Point USA, were casting progressive Christians as heretical. And there was a fellow there named Lucas Miles. He's the head of Turning Point USA Faith. So it's a very powerful organization. They have a faith outreach arm. He's the head of it. And he talked about, you know, how this, like, the heresy of progressivism, right, started to enter the American church in like the 17th century, I think he said. It's really kind of an astonishing statement. And he has titled his book, Woke Jesus, and the subtitle is something like The Heresy Destroying the American Church. So what does he describe? What is woke Jesus to this man? Well, he specifically called out the social gospel. I mean, for a lot of American Christians, the social gospel is absolutely vital to their understanding of the faith. It's love thy neighbor, care for the least of these, and many of the organizations that have been funded, for instance, by the United States, a lot of the faith-based aid organizations and charity organizations are really using this principle to underline their activity. But this is a cohort that really wants to take religion in a far more reactionary and strict place. And this is, listen,
when you say
very,
that, do you mean like anti-gay, anti-woman kind of? Is that what he's really? Is that really the bottom line here?
Yes, absolutely. But it's also hard to express the degree to which the politics leads the religion and not the other way around. The politics leads the theology. Another speaker said there is absolute, I'm quoting here, he said there's absolutely no biblical justification for voting Democrat.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's what he said. He said it.
Do you think, based on some of these visits you've made, I'm starting to hear, especially never-Trumper Republicans, say that MAGA is not the Republican Party. MAGA is a cult, that the Republican Party has ceased to exist. And by that, I think they mean there's no policy, there's no platform. Basically, the bottom line is whatever Trump says, whatever Trump wants. And, you know, the comedian, but also political activist Jordan Klepper spends a lot of time going to Trump rallies. And he'll sometimes say to people, well, you wouldn't vote for anybody who did X or Y. And they go, oh, God, no. And then he's like, well, you know, Trump did both X and Y. And they go, oh, well, you know, he has his reasons. He has good reasons for what he does. So, you know, so you still support him. Oh, absolutely. It doesn't seem to be a fact-based kind of political movement. What do you think?
Yes, I mean, this is a movement that basically denies there's any real truth or value in the world. They use lies or conscious disinformation or propaganda to separate a large sector of the American public from the facts, because that makes them easier to control.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned
about the Republican Party. I think this is not a remotely conservative movement. A truly conservative movement would seek to preserve institutions of value that have served us over the long term. They would seek to prize the integrity of the judiciary. They would seek to preserve and improve public education, and they would really want to protect voting rights. But this is a movement that really wants to tear it all down because they don't believe that democracy has any value at all. And I think those never-Trumpers are absolutely right. The Republican Party for many years, look, this movement preceded Donald Trump, and frankly will long outlast him. But for many years, the movement, the Republican Party leaders thought, well, we can make use of this cohort because they deliver a very reliable slice of the vote. So that's super helpful for us. But they didn't realize that actually the movement was gaining in strength. And today the guardrails have fallen off of the Republican Party, and this movement is frankly in control.
I was just going to say, they thought they could use the movement, but now the movement is using them.
That's true. This is true.
But there have always been people who had these ideas. A long time ago, Rachel Maddow did a history lesson on the American wealthy who were big supporters of Hitler and really, you know, at the very least wanted the United States to stay out of it, but ideally that we should be supporting Hitler. And she said the difference between that kind of fascist ideology was back then it was a minority. Yeah, they might have been rich, but it was a minority of people. It wasn't embraced by one of the two major political parties in the United States, and that's the difference now. But it's still, if you look at all of the opinion polls and surveys, it seems like what this religious right, these people who are out to get democracy, they still are in the minority. Their ideas are in the minority, and yet they have taken control. What can we do about that? How do we regain our power?
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that those of us who want to live in a democracy, as imperfect as it may be, but there's, at least guided by certain principles of equality and pluralism and justice and rule of law, there are more of us than those who want to live in some kind of authoritarian or fascist state with theocratic features and suppression of speech and an economic system that just gives more money to people at the tippy top of the economic ladder. I think that the reason the movement has so much power is because much of it functions as a voter turnout machine in election cycles, and there's just been so much money invested in this movement that they really have a lot of power to turn out their numbers, to turn out their people in disproportionate numbers. And look, in a country where 40 to 50% of people don't bother to vote, and an additional number have their votes essentially stolen from them through race-based gerrymandering and voter suppression and other dirty tactics, you don't need a majority to win elections. All you need is a disproportionately mobilized minority, and that's what movement leaders know. Years ago, Paul Weyrich, who is one of the, I would say, key thinkers who set the stage for the kind of anti-democratic movement we're seeing today, said, I don't want everybody to vote. Our influence in elections goes up when the number of people who vote goes down. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but it's on video. You can look it up. And so one of the key tactics of this movement has been to downgrade the votes that they don't like. And some of the movement leaders actually kind of delight in that. They talk about it. They call it the Republican reapportionment advantage. They're referring to gerrymandering, which is really an anti-democratic dirty trick.
So everybody that I've talked to has said that it is going to take grassroots efforts, grassroots resistance. We can't just sit back and wait for our white knight to show up and save us, that we have to save us. You agree?
Well, I think it's really important to engage in the political process in meaningful ways. There is no substitute for getting out the vote. And, there are other actions that people can take. I think there are a lot of democracy-building organizations that deserve our support. There are voter turnout operations that deserve support. But it's really important to reach out not only to the base and tell them that their voting matters, not just in presidential election cycles, but in every election cycle, but also to reach out to low-propensity voters and reach out to people who feel disenfranchised and say, well, what does it matter? What does my vote matter? Or say things like, well, neither of the candidates is good. You know what? We're not going to get perfect. It's like, in a big, noisy democracy, we're not all going to get everything we want. We need to stop purity testing one another. We need to have a big tent. At a lot of the religious right gatherings I go to, I've been hearing this phrase. A lot of the speakers will say the person who agrees with you 80% of the time is your 80% friend, not your 20% enemy. And, this is true of...
I like that.
We should take a tip from that. I do, too. We don't have to agree on everything, but if there's more we can agree on than disagree on, and we can agree on some core values and core, American values, then I think we really have a chance.
You said something that was echoed by Tom Nichols in the Atlantic magazine, this idea that, yes, we are Democrats, and yes, unlike Republicans, we have a big, diverse tent. But his argument was we have got to focus on the issues and on the positions that win elections, and not be, we're a big tent, but we can't be distracted by every single idiosyncratic group that's part of us. We have to focus. Basically, he was sort of saying focus on the big picture. Would you agree?
I think we need a movement that really speaks to the bread and butter issues that affect ordinary Americans. And the right is very good at setting traps for the people who are on the moderate, liberal, progressive left to fall into. And I think we should really, when they try and set those traps, we should turn the spotlight back on them and say, you want us to talk about this issue, which doesn't affect very many people, because you don't want to focus on the fact that you've got these billionaires rampaging through our government, stealing grandma's Social Security while you're enriching yourself and becoming a trillionaire. I mean, it's really at that level. The funders of this movement, many of them don't care about these culture war issues. They probably have gay married friends and they're completely comfortable with that. But what they do want is tax privileges. They want low regulation for their businesses if they're involved in polluting businesses. They don't want any environmental regulations. And they say they want the free market, but at the same time, they want tax subsidies. They want, like, look at Elon Musk. I mean, the amount of tax subsidies that man has received.
And the government handouts, exactly.
Right. They want their cake and eat it, too. They want protective policies for their monopolistic businesses. They are so rich, and they just want to be richer. And it's really kind of disgraceful that they're basically destroying the democracy to get it. And they just don't care about the rank and file. But they can get the rank and file.
Yeah. I know your book, The Power Worshippers, was turned into a documentary, and I think it was produced by Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner.
It was indeed. And absolutely.
What was that experience like?
It was amazing. I mean, they're wonderful producers, and I think they did a fantastic job. I love that they highlighted voices across the political spectrum, across the religious spectrum, and I think it did a really good job of showing us what's at stake.
But before we wrap this up, you mentioned Lucas Miles, I believe you said, or Miles or Mills? Miles from the Turning Point organization. Obviously, I'm well aware of the names, like, you know, that make it into the media all the time, the Elon Musks and the Steve Bannons of the world. I had not heard of Lucas Miles. Are there other people I should be paying attention to, keep a watch on?
Oh, there's so many. I mean, there's, just to throw out a few names of the people I like to follow. Ralph Reed, who's one of the movement's most seasoned and astute strategists. I think about people like, oh my gosh, there's so many. I mean, I think about Leonard Leo, who is a sort of money man and has played a really important role in not just directing money for the religious right, but also in building up the right-wing legal ecosphere. He built up the Federalist Society to where it is today. When we're talking about the funders, it's really interesting. I'm thinking people like the Corkerys or Barry Side or the Wilkes brothers, Tim Dunn, members of the DeVos Prince family juggernaut. The funders are not any one type. I mean, here's something interesting. Some are evangelical, some are Catholic, some are Jewish, others are atheistic. Frankly, religiously, they're all over the place, but they really want those economic policies. And they know the way to get them is they want privilege, economic policies that privilege them. They get the rank and file all involved and wrapped up in the culture wars, and that's how they do it.
Wow. Katherine Stewart, author of Money, Lies, and God Inside the Movement to Destroy American Democracy. Thank you so much for the work you've been doing and for bringing this information to us.
Thank you so much, Joan. It's great to speak with you today.
We are going to take a break for news. When we come back, we're going to be joined by Thom Hartmann. No, we're not talking about a new Thom Hartmann book. We are just talking about Thom Hartmann and the world we are living in now. You know, Thom Hartmann and Greg Palast have quite a relationship. You know, Thom Hartmann, of course, famously used to have Bernie Sanders on his show all the time. He also publicizes a lot of the work that Greg Palast does, particularly on voter suppression. So we are just going to talk to Thom Hartmann about the state of the world, whether or not he is able to retain optimism and how he thinks we should best move forward. All of that and more after the news.
The Thom Hartmann radio program provides all of the intelligence, information, and insight you'll need to win the water cooler wars. Weekdays 11 to 2 right here on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk, where facts matter. This is WCPT 820, where facts matter.
It's time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
I want somebody who's passionate. I want somebody who can talk to people like a real person, who can make people feel things, who can make people want to follow them.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
We talked recently about how we are the resistance. Nobody's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. One of the people who I count on for keeping me inspired is Thom Hartmann, our host here on WCPT, Monday through Friday. Tom joins us now. Thom Hartmann, how are you?
Hey, Joan, I'm great, but I'll get better. How about you?
Well, it's hump day, and, I feel pretty good about things on hump day. Is Louise holding up?
Oh yeah, we're fine. We're very concerned about the fate and future of our nation, and about whether democracy will survive this just all-out open assault on it by Trump and Vance and Musk and the Heritage Foundation and the right-wing billionaires in America. But I have a lot of faith in this country. We've been through hell and back multiple times. World War II, the Great Depression, the Vietnam War, the Civil War, the War of 1812. I mean, it just goes on and on. I really believe that we're gonna be okay. But I'm still working as hard as I can. I think it's possible that we fail or the country fails if we fail the country, if we don't stand up and join together and speak out as loudly and as passionately as we can.
Sorry, we're getting a little bit of feedback on my end. One of the things that has cheered me immensely is seeing clips from the various town halls that both Democrats and Republicans have had. The Republicans are hearing that people don't like the direction that they are taking, and the Democrats are hearing that they need to fight harder. I think that in times of crisis, most of our problems are solved by the pressure flows uphill, if you will, from the grassroots up to the leadership. And I am so pleased to see that happening. I spoke on Saturday to McHenry County women Democrats. And man, Tom, they were fired up. Some of them are elected officials, but most of them aren't. They're just people who believe in this country and who believe in democracy. And when I talk to people like that, it really does my heart glad. I agree with you that I think we can get through this, but I don't think it's going to be pretty.
Well, it wasn't a majority of Americans who put Trump in the White House, and it wasn't even a majority of voters who put him in the White House. He won a plurality, not a majority. And I think it's important that we always remember that. We are the majority, or at least those people who are not with Trump are the majority. And, that's why these guys are doing all this drastic stuff.
What do you make of Donald Trump's little mini-me, Elon Musk? I understood, Trump can never say no to somebody who's really rich and wants to support him financially. But, doing press conferences from the West Wing, being sitting right next to him when they do a presidential interview with Sean Hannity, showing up today at the cabinet meeting. This is getting really weird, Tom. What do you make of this?
It is weird. Nobody elected the world's richest man to run our country, and that's appears to be what's going on right now. But whether Donald Trump is just so excited to have somebody that he considers his superior, somebody he thinks is smarter than him and he knows is richer than him, guiding him essentially and doing the things for him, or whether he gets some kind of kick out of feeling like he's directing Musk, or whether it's that he's afraid of Musk. I mean, Musk has the financial capability to pretty much destroy anybody he chooses to. He could even run ads against the Republican Party right now if he got pissed off enough. So I'm not sure anybody really knows exactly what kind of relationship Trump and Musk have, or what hold Musk has over Trump, or what's really going on there. I mean, Musk's son walked up to Donald Trump and said, "You're not the president. Get out of that chair and shut up your mouth." And Trump just took it. I mean, it's really pretty breathtaking. I've never seen, outside of cowing himself in front of Putin, like at Helsinki, where his body language was that of, the beta to Putin's alpha, and he basically, caved to everything Putin said. That and Musk, and of course Putin's probably richer than Musk.
Yeah, well, by some accounts, Putin is the world's richest man because the oligarchs serve at his pleasure, and their fortunes, by some accounting, are really his fortunes. I mean, and they have to stay on his good side lest they decide to suddenly take flight out of the nearest window or down the nearest stairwell, which seems to happen a lot. Tom, can you still hear me? Lady B, why don't we take a break and see if we can get this connection a little better? We'll be right back after this.
Take Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, with you on the go by using the TuneIn app on your phone. Just search for WCPT 820. Choose Views with Richard Chew.
Can we fix our democracy? Absolutely. We have to. We have no choice. Has it been a democracy that's had major flaws and holes in it like Swiss cheese? Absolutely. And do our systems fail us? Yes, they do. It starts with this, guys. Trust me when I say this. It starts with acknowledging that we have these issues and we have these problems.
Richard Chew, weekday mornings at 6 on WCPT 820.
You're listening to WCPT 820 because facts matter.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by Tom Hartman. He does our middays here at WCPT Monday through Friday. He also does a report that you can get emailed to you, the Hartman Report. And we have talked before about his many books having to do with how we got here, the history of the American experience, if you will. Tom, we were just talking about Elon Musk and the strange outsized influence that he has not only on Trump, but also on the members of Congress, and I would also think the members of the Senate, though that perhaps hasn't been as widely publicized. Supposedly when he first wanted to put an end to the very first budget proposal, he used his money as a weapon. You get rid of this budget, I don't like it, or I'm going to use my money to primary you. And we know that a lot of people who are in elected office, retaining that office is their number one priority. So do you foresee anything that could be said or anything that could happen that would cause either the Republicans in Congress or the Republicans in the Senate to actually stand up and oppose some of this nonsense?
Well, and my apologies for dropping off, Joan. My software crashed. I think it's important to remember Lincoln's comment, that public opinion is everything, that at least in a democracy. I mean, you could argue we're no longer in a democracy, but I still think public opinion plays a huge role. It's one of the reasons I think why Republicans this week apparently have sent out the memo, don't do any more town halls. We don't want any more of those kind of clips circulating in the media. So, where this goes, and, I also think that when the Supreme Court, when Clarence Thomas was being massaged by, or bribed, frankly, by right-wing billionaires and became the deciding vote in 2010 on Citizens United,
which threw the doors open to any very, very rich person basically buying any politician or destroying any politician that they want. John Paul Stevens wrote a scathing dissent in Citizens United. It's really worth reading. I mean, every word of it is just prescient, in which he predicted exactly what we're experiencing right now, which is that, very extraordinary rich individuals or corporations would rise up and seize control of a political party and seize control of our political system. And so here we've got the world's richest guy who has seized control of both the political system and the GOP. And that's why I think Trump may well be terrified of Musk. I mean, Musk sure slapped down Joni Ernst when she was thinking.
Yes, indeed,
she did.
He did.
Yeah, and he did it by putting $10 million worth of, I believe it was, fact checked me on the amount, but by buying ads in Iowa, promoting Pete Hegseth and kind of implying that Joni Ernst better get with the program. And she saw that if she wants to continue to be a senator, this is the price. She's going to have to kiss, Musk and Trump's ass. And I think it's just a tragedy. The framers and founders of this country and framers of the Constitution have to be rolling in their graves. This is also exactly what Henry Wallace, Franklin Roosevelt's second vice president, warned us about in a 1944 essay in the New York Times, where the Times asked him, are there fascists in America? And he said, yes, they are the leaders of business. And they are trying to reach out for power, and we're going to put them in a box. But look out, because if they ever get unleashed, they will destroy this country. I'm going to write about that this week. In fact, I think and Sinclair Lewis. I mean, if you've read It Can't Happen Here, his 1920s or 30s novel, I think it was the 30s, with Buzz Windrip, the newspaper publisher from Vermont who fled up to Canada to avoid the new fascist president who came in, talking like a good old boy and being a populist, basically. This is the danger of populism, always has been. So I think we're facing a really serious challenge that was largely set up by 5 corrupt Republicans on the U.S. Supreme Court, tragically.
Yeah, I think so, too. Is the bar too high if we expect people in elected office, particularly high elected office, they get sworn in, they swear an oath to the Constitution, but when, like, say, Joni Ernst, faced with her own political demise, she voted for somebody she clearly, if Joni Ernst had voted no, his nomination would have never left the committee. Hegseth would have never made it to the floor. Is it too much to look at Joni Ernst and feel that she has failed?
Well, she has failed. She clearly put her political career above her country. But in a larger sense, the system has failed, and the system has failed because it was corrupted by these 5 Republicans on the Supreme Court, now 6. But the 5 who voted in Citizens United. And frankly, a completely different set of 5 who back in 1978 in the Bellotti decision voted to recognize corporations as persons and give them the right to buy politicians as well and influence political campaigns. That overturned the Tillman Act, which Teddy Roosevelt busted his butt to get through Congress in 1907, which made it a felony. It was a federal felony for a corporation to give money to any politician or candidacy for federal office. And that stood, right up until the Supreme Court took it down in 1978. And that, of course, then provided the means for the oil industry in 79 and 80 to float Ronald Reagan into the White House on a small tsunami of, petro money. So, this isn't a new or instant problem that we're facing. It's one that's been with us for some time, and there's always been this dynamic tension in America. But never before have we seen the big business and the people that Mussolini would call the fascists, that Henry Wallace would call the fascists, actually take over in its entirety an administration. This is something brand new in the American experience, and one just hopes that enough Republicans are going to become more afraid of their constituents than they are of Elon Musk's money, that this can be turned around. Because, frankly, at the moment, the Democrats can't stop this. I mean, they can raise hell. I love the fact that Ro Khanna is going to be doing town halls in 3 different Republican districts in California, because Republicans won't. And Mark Pokian has been doing that for years. You know, he goes into the red districts in Wisconsin and does town halls. I wish every Democratic member of the House of Representatives would adopt a district, and every Democratic senator would adopt a state, and do like Bernie's doing right now, and go into go into those districts for those states and hold town halls, because the Republicans won't. I mean, if Democratic leadership could get their act together to just do that, which would not be particularly expensive or difficult, I think you could see a major turnaround in America. I'm just concerned that Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries are not, frankly, leading.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I was going to ask you about. Hakeem Jeffries, he just appeared in Chicago like a week or so ago to promote a new book that he's written. And now the book is called The ABCs of Democracy. But Indivisible Chicago said, we're organizing a protest. While the world is in such turmoil, while the country's on fire, this is not the time to go on a book tour. This is a time to be fighting tooth and nail and working the phones. And on the one, I agree with that. And I started, how could we put a good spin on this? Well, maybe doing his book tour, he's going to be visiting different communities that would never listen to, say, a Hakeem Jeffries soundbite on CNN or see him on their local news. That was as good as I could come up with, that the idea that he wanted to reach perhaps different audiences than traditional politics reaches. But I know that, it was widely reported when J.B. Pritzker helped organize that Democratic governor's call with Chuck Schumer, basically saying, dude, you've got to do more. And Chuck Schumer, as part of the conversation, said, well, Cory Booker is teaching us all how to use social media. He's put together a PowerPoint presentation to show, what the different platforms are and how often you should post the kind of things that you should put. And I'm reading this, and I just wanted to start hitting my head against my desk. This was part of Schumer's, see, we're doing things. We're going to all watch this PowerPoint presentation from Cory Booker on how we can use social media. And I'm thinking to myself, all is lost. Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a real tragedy. I mean, you just have to ask, what would Martin Luther King Jr. do? It's like, for that matter, what would John Lewis do?
Well, that was that famous soundbite that made circulation from the town hall. I can't remember the congressman's name off the top of my head, but it was Albany, New York. And this guy got up and said, I was so proud of you when you did those interviews on the Capitol steps with Maxine Waters but then I thought to myself, if John Lewis were there, he wouldn't just, speak to a couple of cameras. He would get arrested. And he was like, that's exactly what I want you to do. I want you to get arrested. And the guy said, and we will be there and we will get arrested with you. And the crowd stood up in a standing ovation as the Democratic congressperson, Paul Tonko, sat there, frankly, looking, I think, a little bit befuddled by all of this.
Yeah, it's so weird, Joan, because as you well know, before the election, we had the president of the United States, Joe Biden, the vice president, who was the candidate for president, Kamala Harris, and the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and I mean, we had this whole constellation of Democratic superstars telling us that Trump and Vance were fascists and that we were fighting for the survival of our country. And I haven't heard a peep. I believe Kamala Harris has given one speech since she lost the election. I haven't heard a word from Joe Biden. Where the hell is Bill Clinton? Where is Barack Obama? I mean, are we facing an existential crisis or not? If we are, it should be all hands on deck. And if we're not, somebody should come out and tell us to just chill out. And I'm not talking about James Carville.
Roll over and play possum till they go away.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think his advice this time is good. You know, I will tell you, I've said the same thing about Kamala Harris. And I would get pushback from people in the audience and some political science professors who say, well, you know, traditionally, if you lose the election for president, you go away for a while and you're not heard from for a while.
Donald Trump.
Exactly. And it's not proper. Did you know this, Tom? It's really not proper for former presidents to be speaking out because, you know, the whole, you know, we did the job. We're not going to criticize the other people doing the job. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe that's the way it's always been, but this doesn't seem like regular times. This seems like the kind of time where we want to hear from Bill Clinton and we want to hear from Barack Obama and we want to hear from Kamala Harris.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Jimmy Carter came on my program and said, you know, we have now slid into oligarchy. This is you know, and it was because of the Supreme Court. I mean, he was willing to just come right out and say it. But you know, he's gone now, sadly, and you know, we're left with these people who frankly are letting us down, in my opinion. I'm you know, I'm a Democrat. I'm a big fan of the Democratic Party. I support the Democratic Party. I think the other thing that we all have to do, and I again, this is something that the Democratic Party leadership should be telling everybody. But if you want to have a Democratic Party that's going to fight back, it's going to have to come from the bottom up. Mm-hmm. And what that means, and particularly if you know, for people listening to this program right now who are probably progressives, if you want to have a progressive Democratic Party, that's got to come from the bottom up. And by bottom up, I mean the local precincts. You know, the local. Become a precinct committee person. Volunteer. Join your Democratic Party. You know, when a critical threshold, and I don't even think it's 50%. I think it's probably closer to 25% of the local Democratic parties become, you know, are taken over by local progressives and activists, and are willing to, you know, get out there and lead and speak out and generate some energy and wake people the hell up. Then the Democratic Party itself will change, and it'll become, you know, less corporate. I mean, you know, it took this corporate turn in 1992 when Bill Clinton kind of became Ronald Reagan light. And, you know, we left a lot of that behind with the Biden presidency. Joe Biden was one of the best presidents of my lifetime, but he never told anybody what he was doing. He was also one of the worst communicators of my lifetime. But
that was the tradition. He came from the Senate. You know, he's not going to get out there and toot his own horn. And, you know, in one of the interviews he did very late in the game when he was no longer running, he said, you know, like when we sent those checks out to people, not only should I have signed them, but I should have started telling everybody you're getting Biden bucks. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, Joe, you're exactly right.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is what Trump did, you know, back in 2020.
Yes. So he absolutely did.
Yeah, and Trump was, you know, on TV every single day for 4 years, or virtually every day for 4 years, and is today. And Biden just vanished for 3.5 years, and for 4 years. And you know, it's a tragedy. I mean, you would think anybody with any common sense would have said this is no way to run a government and to run for, you know, re-election in political office.
Yeah.
So, but here we are. You know,
here we are.
We can complain and whine and, you know, all day long, and it's not going to do a damn bit of it. We do need, all of us need to get active with our local Democratic parties. We need to contribute to progressive politicians. From speaking for myself, every time I see a Democrat stand up and do something brave, and frankly, lately it's been mostly Essie and Jasmine Crockett and a handful of people who I'm sure you could list their names as easily as I could. I go to their campaign website and send them $10 or $25. You know, I'm not a rich guy, but you know, I can afford, you know, in aggregate, maybe $1,000 a year to give to politicians in little tiny pieces, and it's just my way of saying to them, I've got your back, I'm with you. And I think if a lot of us started doing that maybe that would, you know, steel the spines of some of the other Democrats. Although Hakeem Jeffries on Rachel Maddow show the other day said, we don't need any more steel in our spines. I think they do.
I think they do, too. Tom Hartman, thank you so much. It is always a pleasure to talk to you, my friend.
Oh, thank you for having me, Joan. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always an honor to be on your program.
We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more after this.
This is Chicago's Progressive Talk, 820 AM, WCPT Willow Springs, and online at WCPT820.com, where facts matter.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Every weekday afternoon from 2 to 5 p.m. on WCPT 820.
Quite a while ago, somebody texted in a question about the Electoral College and how it got started and how it worked. And while I can give a very shallow, sort of surfacey answer to that, I realized that I wanted to learn more about the Electoral College and what it is and how we got it and what it was meant to do and whether or not it still functions. We have now found an expert on American electoral politics. It is Elaine Kmark, who's a senior fellow in governance studies and the director of the Center for Effective Public Management at the Brookings Institute. Elaine, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, you know what? Let's just assume I know nothing about the Electoral College because, Elaine, that's closer to the truth than you might guess. So why was it invented? How was it created? Who do we have to thank for this?
Well, we can thank the Founding Fathers, who at the Constitutional Convention had to cut a deal. And the deal had to include the small states in the Union, convince them to stay in the Union, and that they would not be overshadowed by what were then the big states of Massachusetts and Virginia. And so it was a political deal. Every state got 2 senators, and then congressmen according to population. And then the Electoral College was, for each state, included the 2 senators. So the small states got what they wanted, and they signed on to the Union and signed on to the Constitution.
Which is actually the fact that the small states got so much power in this is what a lot of people don't like. Some people now refer to the Electoral College as a kind of minority rules system. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, that is accurate. And here's what's happened. Remember, during the 19th century, during the 20th century, there were 25 presidential elections. None of them resulted in an Electoral College winner who lost the popular vote. In other words, for a full century, things were kind of okay. People didn't notice it. And then in the 5 presidential elections of the 21st century, 6 now with the most recent one, 2 of them ended up with the winner of the popular vote losing the Electoral College. That is because the population density of the United States changed in a way that I don't think the Founding Fathers could have predicted.
So they did this because they couldn't see it coming. Because on the one hand, you hear from people like those who live in Wyoming that they want, especially for president, they want their votes to count. And they look at a state like California and they think, if we didn't have the Electoral College, we might as well just stay home when it comes to a presidential election because, states like New York and California that have these monster populations are going to be the only states that matter. So I understand both arguments. But on the other hand, if you live in California, you're thinking there's all of us here. We have an economy that rivals many countries around the world. Shouldn't we have a greater say?
That's exactly right. And what happened, and people laugh when I say this, is if you want to understand what's wrong with the Electoral College today, you have to go back to the agricultural revolution. And what we have now in the United States is about 1.3% of the entire population is employed in the United States working directly in agriculture. And that means that the middle of the country sort of emptied out, and they do a marvelous job. I mean, they produce food for the entire world, but the country moved to the coast and to Texas. Mm-hmm. So now you have, the big states are, underrepresented, vastly underrepresented in the Electoral College. One electoral college vote in Wyoming is worth many times more important than an electoral college vote in California.
There has been an effort to circumvent the Electoral College, this idea that states can sign on to a program where they agree that all of their Electoral College votes are going to go to whomever wins the popular vote. But not enough states have signed on so that we can say the popular vote will determine the presidency. And if I lived in North Dakota or Wyoming, why would I sign on to something like this that I could say effectively cuts my electoral legs out from under me?
Well, that's exactly right. Look, I mean, I like to say that the reason the Electoral College exists is the exact same reason we had it in the first place, right? Is the power of the small states. They don't want to change it. And the program you just mentioned is called the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. And right now, 15 states and the District of Columbia have signed on to it. But these states are only 196 electoral college votes. And so they're well shy of the number needed to have all the states enact it this way. Now, the reason this is, I think, probably the only way to do it is that to get rid of the Electoral College, you'd have to amend the Constitution. Yeah. That is a very lengthy, complicated process. However, the Constitution does not say that the Electoral College votes should be winner take all. That's up to the states. And two states, Nebraska and Maine, already award their congressional district electoral college votes on the basis of who won the district. So you could have like 3 votes out of Nebraska or 3 votes out of Maine going to one candidate and 1 vote going to another candidate. So states really have great latitude in how they award their electoral college votes. But again, you want that to happen only if you're going to get to 270 electoral college votes. Mm-hmm.
If we did theoretically try to amend the Constitution to get rid of the Electoral College, how long a process would that be?
Well, you'd have to get Congress to act first. And once again, in the Senate, you run up against the small state problem, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, those small states and the 2 senators from Vermont and Wyoming, I'm not sure they're going to want to sign on to that. And then you have to go state by state passing the constitutional amendment. It's a long process, and most people don't think that is a realistic alternative.
Mm-hmm. You are an expert on the Electoral College. Do you have an opinion about it over and above just where it came from and what it is and how it works?
Yeah, I think that the country has outgrown the institution, basically. All right. The Founding Fathers couldn't imagine a country where you had such density of populations as we have in, say, New York and Los Angeles, and they couldn't imagine a country where you didn't have farming close by. Right, mm-hmm. Everybody. The end of the 1700s and the 1800s, every state had farmers because you didn't ship avocados across the country from California. Right, they couldn't have conceived that. And what that meant was that the population was, for many, many years, was more or less evenly distributed across the country. And that is no longer the case. And that's why the Electoral College now is not not very useful and actually produces some pretty undemocratic results.
Yeah, but do you see any realistic either workaround or constitutional amendment in my lifetime, which I will tell you probably isn't that much longer.
Mine too.
Yeah.
I don't see a realistic constitutional solution. I do see the possibility, if this keeps happening, of people, even in small states, saying, come on, this is just not fair. This is just ridiculous, the way this is happening. And you might pick up enough votes, enough states to decide to change the way they allocate their electoral college votes. And that's a simple state law. That's not a great big convoluted constitutional amendment. It's a simple state law. So you could imagine it.
If you have a vivid imagination.
Well, yeah, you need a pretty vivid imagination. I grant you that.
Elaine Kmark and I are going to take a break. She's the founding director of the Center for Effective Public Management and senior fellow of governance studies at the Brookings Institute. We'll be right back after this.
Alexa, play WCPT.
WCPT from TuneIn.
If you are a listener, a financial planner, a CPA, or a divorce attorney, if you are wondering why you cannot reach your mortgage provider, it's distinctly possible they're no longer in the business. In the last 2 years, 165,000 mortgage professionals didn't renew their license. That's what Team Hochberg is telling us. So if you want to buy a new home or refinance the one you've got, you should give them a try. I've refinanced with them 2 or 3 times. I trust them. They make a difficult process as painless as possible, and they're good people. So remember, in the last 2 years, while other companies have been shutting down, Team Hochberg has been adding loan officers from that pool of 165,000 who've decided to go. They're stronger than ever. They'd love to earn your business. So if you want to work with experienced mortgage professionals, do what I did. Call Team Hochberg, 855-563-2843, or go online, 56david.com. That number again, 855-563-2843, or online, 56david.com. Lower.com, equal housing lender, NMLS 1124061.
Don't turn that dial. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, returns right now.
A fair balance where the facts come out.
On WCPT 820.
And I'm speaking with Elaine Kmark, who's a founding director of the Center for Effective Public Management, senior fellow of governance studies at Brookings Institute. I invited her on to explain the Electoral College, which she has done beautifully. I also want to tell you that she's the co-author of a book, Lies That Kill, A Citizen's Guide to Disinformation, and she wrote on her own, Primary Politics, Everything You Need to Know About How America Nominates Its Presidential Candidates. Elaine, I think you have to start putting out a series of books on civics. Nobody is taught civics anymore. Nobody knows how government works. There's a woman I follow on TikTok. She does a newsletter called Chop Wood, Carry Water that has thousands of subscribers. Her name's Jessica Craven, and she tells a story on TikTok about how she had a conversation with a young man who was her physical therapist, and he told her he didn't vote in the last election because he didn't think his vote mattered. And forget about the presidential side of it. She explained to him about down ballot races and how even though maybe the race for Congress or the race for Senate or president gets all the attention, almost all ballots have like judges. They have like your water reclamation district, your county officials. And she explained to this guy, that these people, these local people, really had more influence on his life than anybody he voted on at the congressional level. And he at the end of the conversation, he said, I really want to thank you for this. Nobody has ever really explained this to me. This is where we're at, which is why Elaine Kmark is going to do a series of books explaining to us basic civics. You know, I mean, maybe I need to get out that Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes law, and play that. It's staggering to me.
Well, not only have we stopped teaching civics in high school, which is really, I think, to blame for a lot of the dysfunction we see in our democracy, but we also stopped teaching them basic American history. So, you know, it used to be that at colleges, even at community colleges, you would have to take a history course, and you'd have to take either American history or world history. And it's really hard to be a functioning citizen if you don't have a basic knowledge of civics and if you don't have a basic knowledge of American history.
Yeah. I've realized, especially doing this job, that my knowledge of presidential history, which is really useful having conversations with people, is woefully absent. You know, I get these catalogs from local colleges, you know, how they have Elaine courses for old people, you know, like non-credit, you know, emeritus classes. And I've been desperately searching for, you know, something to do with American history or presidential history, you know, because I read probably more politics than the average person. And I feel this deficit. And supposedly I was from the era where we were more educated about these things.
It's hard to listen. It is hard in this day and age, frankly, to keep up. But one of the things that surprised me when I came to Brookings is we wrote one or two things that we called explainer pieces, which were not analysis like, you know, most of us do, but they were just explaining something. So, for instance, you know, the normal article on the Brookings website might get, you know, 5,000 to 10,000 readers. We did a simple explainer piece on how we estimated the number of illegal aliens in the United States. And guess how many readers we had?
I don't know.
1.2 million readers.
Wow.
And that has happened every time we put out something that's not, it's not opinion, you know, it's not sophisticated analysis. It's just, here's how this works, or here's how that works. And then we got the IT people to start giving us a little bit of data on our readers, and the average age was 35.
Wow.
Which means that we were hitting we were filling a gap, which we were surprised at, of a generation that had not had this basic piece of their education.
Wow. That's really amazing. You know, I think, too, I understand that there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there, but I think sometimes people don't understand who they can trust because we'll hear all reporters are the same. Well, they're not. Yeah. But, you know, when I was younger, there was an assumption that reporters were telling you the truth. That doesn't seem to be a widespread assumption anymore. And we have one local publication. They do hyper-local news. And I don't know if they still do this, but they used to they had a box on top of every article that said, you know, how they reported the article. Like, you know, did they rely on secondary sources or original sources? And I think that there are a lot of people who don't understand why a reporter at OANN and a reporter for, say, the New York Times are different. They're all biased. They all just tell us from a particular point of view. And I think it's been a real failing of the media to continue to rest on their laurels and assume that if you work for the Washington Post or the New York Times, everyone will simply know that everything you share with them is straight up truth. I think there's so much education.
Well, that's why there's some school districts are adopting curricula called news literacy. And what a news literacy curricula does is it teaches students to look at a story critically, you know, and to ask, okay, what are the sources for the story? What is the publication that's putting out this story? Are there other publications publishing similar stories, or there's similar facts around? And it takes students through a little bit of critical thinking and a little bit about how the news industry works, and then in the wild world of the internet, right, how to try to distinguish truth from fiction. And I think that that should be a standard part of education in every high school in the country.
I think it could be also part of those lectures for old people. I'd sign up for one of those. Keep your brain from turning into mush. Learn something new. I love it. Yeah. The one thing that I do love on cable is occasionally, when there's something that happens, they'll bring on a presidential historian to put whatever the events are in context. Oh, I love those segments.
That's right. There's not enough of those on the news because people don't understand the context. They just report the news.
Yeah. So when are you going to publish this new series?
Well, Joan, thank you very much for suggesting it. And, maybe if you could help me find a publisher, I'll do it, okay?
Okay. Well, if you can explain the Electoral College to me, then I think you can explain anything to anybody.
Well, I draw the line at astrophysics, okay?
Okay. And one other point, speaking of how we do what we do, the Brookings Institute, are you Republican or Democrat? Do you have a point of view there?
We're a 501c3. We're nonpartisan. And we're composed mostly of political scientists, economists, a few historians and sociologists thrown in. And basically, we were founded more than 100 years ago to provide information and analysis to the federal government on basic governance questions. So we're all over the place in terms of our partisanship.
Please don't tell me you rely on federal grants to do your work.
No, we do not.
Thank God.
Thank goodness.
One institution that's going to survive the next couple of years.
Well, we hope so.
Gosh, I hope so, too. Elaine Kamark is the founding director of the Center for Effective Public Management and the senior fellow of governance studies at the Brookings Institute. I, for one, am going to pick up Lies That Kill, A Citizen's Guide to Disinformation, and Primary Politics, everything you need to know about how America nominates its presidential candidates. Thank you so much. It has been such a pleasure, Elaine.
Well, Joan, it's been a lot of fun to talk to you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. That's going to do it for me today. Of course, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is going to be up next. She has a 40th Ward committee woman, Maggie O'Keefe, is going to be one of her guests today. And I want to let you know that Richard on tomorrow's Choose Views is going to be talking to Elliot Richardson, president and co-founder of the Small Business Advocacy Council. Tomorrow, I'm going to be doing one of our very, very popular media segments. Yes, Mark Jacob and Jennifer Schulze will be back. By the way, Jennifer just published a new Substack where she talks about how whatever failings there might be in the legacy media, she thinks local news is doing a pretty terrific job these days. But we will talk about that. We may also tomorrow, honestly, talk about the new leadership at MSNBC. I'm sure you've heard about that big shakeup. Joy Reid is out. Katie Fang, while still allowed to report, has losing her show. Alex Wagner is not going to be getting her show back. As Rachel pointed out, seems an odd time to purge people of color. But that's what bosses do sometimes. Okay. Have a great evening, my friends. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Oh, by the way, this Saturday, Ezra Levin, the guy who helped found Indivisible, is going to be with Edwin. That should be cool. Have a great evening. Good night.